Every day, he willingly drank the poison his enemies served him with a smile. It was not a vial of dark liquid, but a cup of carefully crafted words, and Leo, the finest woodcarver in the 5 valleys, accepted it as if it were wine. He would stand in his workshop, the morning sun illuminating the delicate curls of cedar and oak on the floor, and listen. His rivals, led by the impeccably dressed and silver-tongued Silas, would stop by under the guise of friendly admiration. Another masterpiece, Leo, Silas would begin, running a dismissive finger over a newly carved bird's wing. Though, if I may be so bold, is not the arch of it a little aggressive? The market prefers subtlety. Another rival, Marcus, would nod sagely. He's right. Your passion is your gift, Leo, but it can be overwhelming. You must learn to tame it. They spoke of taming his passion as one would speak of taming a wild beast. And Leo, whose heart was as soft as the pine wood he used for practice, believed them. He saw their critiques not as jealousy, but as the generous wisdom of peers. That afternoon, he would take his finest chisel and sand down the aggressive arch of the wing until it was timid, common, and dead. The choice he faced each morning was simple and agonizing: to trust the fire in his own soul that guided his hands, or to trust the cool, collected voices of men who had never created anything that truly lived. He chose them, believing humility was the path to perfection. His first attempt to solve the problem was to work even harder, to internalize their advice more deeply. He began to anticipate their criticism, softening edges and dulling his boldest designs before they even saw them. His workshop, once a sanctuary of vibrant creation, became a sterile laboratory of self-doubt. The raw, breathtaking energy that made his work famous began to fade. The choice was no longer about art, it was about acceptance. One evening, a royal courier arrived with a proclamation. The Queen had announced a grand commission, a magnificent centerpiece for the Great Hall, a work that would be remembered for a century. The carver chosen would be granted the royal seal and a fortune. As Leo held the parchment, Silas appeared at his door, his smile wider than ever. "A momentous opportunity, my friend," he said, his eyes glinting. "Now, more than ever, you must listen to sound advice. This is no time for experiments." The stakes had just been raised from personal pride to a life-changing legacy, and the choice Leo had to make was no longer just about his art, but about his entire future. Leo locked himself away, driven by a desperate need to win the royal commission. He began his work on a grand block of ancient walnut, but his hands, once so certain, now hesitated with every cut. Silas's voice was a constant whisper in his ear. Is it too bold? Is it too different? He remembered Marcus's warning about taming his passion, and so he smothered every instinct that felt uniquely his. He carved a stag, but instead of the wild, defiant creature he saw in his mind's eye, he carved a creature of placid obedience. He planed its antlers until they were smooth and symmetrical, stripping them of their chaotic, natural glory. Each day was a battle against himself. When he tried to add a flourish of intricate, untamed foliage at the base, he stopped, imagining the condescending smiles of his rivals. He sanded it down into simple, predictable leaves. The pressure mounted in a suffocating spiral. He stopped sleeping, his nights filled with the ghosts of the beautiful things he had sacrificed for the sake of being acceptable. His workshop grew dim, thick with the dust of his abandoned ideas. His hands, once his source of joy, became mere tools executing the will of others. He felt himself falling, losing grip not just on his craft, but on his own identity. The day of the presentation arrived. Leo, gaunt and exhausted, unveiled his stag. The judges were polite. They called it technically proficient and well executed. But there was no gasp of awe, no silence of wonder. It was a piece of wood, expertly shaped, but utterly devoid of a soul. The commission was awarded to Silas, whose carving of a perfectly symmetrical, uninspired royal crest was deemed a reflection of noble stability. Leo felt the floor drop out from beneath him. He had not only lost, but he had lost by betraying the very gift that made him worthy of competing in the first place. He returned to his empty workshop, the silence screaming at him. He looked at the stag, a monument to his own cowardice. That night, a new complication arrived in the form of a letter. It was from the Merchant Guild, informing him that due to his recent stylistic deviations and failure to secure the royal commission, his apprentices were being reassigned to more commercially viable masters. He was not only a failure, he was now completely alone. In the depths of his despair, Leo decided to destroy the stag. He raised a heavy mallet, his knuckles white, ready to splinter the symbol of his shame into 1,000 pieces. Just as he was about to swing, the door creaked open. An old man stood there, one of his earliest patrons, a quiet gentleman named Arthur who had not visited him in years. Arthur walked slowly around the lifeless stag, his gaze taking in every compromised line. He did not offer sympathy or advice. He simply looked at Leo and asked a single, devastating question: whose fear made this? The word fear struck Leo like a physical blow. Not failure, not caution, but fear. In that moment, the truth crashed down on him. The poison he had been drinking was not criticism, it was fear. Their fear of his talent, which they had expertly disguised and fed to him until it became his own. For a fleeting moment, he felt a surge of power. He saw the path back. He would not destroy the stag. He would use it as a reminder. He would start again, carving something for himself, something born not of fear, but of the fire he had almost allowed to be extinguished. Hope was a fragile spark in the darkness. But this hope was a trap. A week later, as Leo began sketching a new design, a phoenix rising from a chaotic burst of flames, all sharp angles and wild energy, Silas and his group appeared. They saw the rejected stag still on its pedestal and the new, defiant sketches. Silas's face was a mask of practiced concern. "Leo, my friend," he said, his voice dripping with false pity. "We heard you lost the apprentices. We came to offer our support." He glanced at the new drawing. "Ah," he sighed. "I see. You are retreating into your old habits. That, aggression. It is this very impulse that cost you the commission. We were only trying to help you overcome your weakness." He turned to the others. "You see. He cannot help himself." They nodded, their faces a chorus of solemn agreement. They had not just made him fail, they had perfectly framed his unique genius as the very source of that failure. The trap snapped shut. In that moment, Leo was in the lowest place he had ever been. He did not just believe he was a bad artist, he believed that the best part of him, the very core of his creative soul, was a flaw that needed to be erased. My friend, have you ever been in a place so dark you believed the darkness was your own fault? That is where Leo was. He sat on the floor of his workshop, a tomb of silent wood, and felt nothing. The fire was gone. But then, in the gloom, he looked down at his own hands. He saw the landscape of his life etched into them, the faint white scars from a slipped chisel, the deep, hard calluses from thousands of hours of devotion, the strength that could command the most stubborn oak. These hands knew the truth. They had not been built by caution. They were not shaped by the opinions of other men. They were the product of his own untamed passion. The epiphany did not come like a lightning bolt, but like the slow, quiet dawn. The poison was not what they served him. The poison was his own decision to open his mouth and drink. He did not need to fight them. He did not need to prove them wrong. He only needed to stop drinking. He stood up. He walked past the timid stag and the wild sketches. He picked up a small, forgotten block of dark mahogany. With a newfound clarity, he began to carve. He did not carve for the queen, or for the guild, or for his rivals. He carved for his own scarred hands. The annual guild exhibition was a week later. Silas stood beside his prize-winning crest, accepting praise. Then, a quiet murmur spread through the crowd. Leo had entered. He carried no grand statue. He walked to an empty corner and placed the small block of mahogany on a cloth. On it, he had carved a single, cupped hand. It was not a perfect hand, it was scarred, calloused, and strong. And held within its palm was a single, perfectly formed drop of liquid. It was a masterpiece of tension and meaning, a tribute to both vulnerability and strength. The crowd gathered, drawn by its quiet, undeniable power. They saw the story in it without a single word being spoken. Silas finally pushed his way to the front, his smile tight. He prepared his next cup of poison. An interesting little piece, Leo, he began. A bit sentimental, perhaps, but... He trailed off. Leo did not look at him. He was watching a young girl who was staring at the carving with wide, wondrous eyes. He simply gave the smallest, calmest of smiles and said nothing. He had refused the cup. Silas stood there, his words unspoken, his power gone. He was invisible. Leo had learned the ultimate truth. The most powerful response to those who offer you poison with a smile is not to argue, not to fight, but to simply let them see you refuse to drink. Your life is not shaped by the poison you are offered, it is shaped by the moment you finally decide you are no longer thirsty. A terrible disease was draining the life out of him, leaving only an empty shell. It was not in his blood or his bones, it was in his soul, a voracious parasite that fed on applause. Leo called it the hunger. It started as a faint tremor in his hands the moment a new idea sparked in his mind, a brilliant, shimmering concept for a building that could reshape the skyline. But before his pencil could even touch the paper, the hunger would demand its tribute. It was a physical craving, a desperate need to feel the warmth of praise before a single brick was laid. His mind would race past the grueling work of blueprints and stress calculations, straight to the glorious finale, the press conference, the adoring faces, the validation that his genius was recognized. His latest vision, the Olympus Tower, was his masterpiece. A twisting spire of glass and green terraces that seemed to breathe with the city. It was the project that could silence all doubters, the one that could finally satisfy the hunger for good. He clutched the preliminary sketches, the lines almost vibrating with potential. He could start working now, lock himself away, and wrestle this beautiful monster into existence. Or he could do what he always did. He could feed the beast. The choice was a raw, physical ache. He tried to resist. For an hour, he sat at his drafting table, the silence of the office deafening. The clean white paper mocked him. The hunger gnawed at his insides, whispering that a dream untold was a dream that did not exist. It told him he was nothing without their approval. He broke. He picked up the phone and called a press conference. It was a spectacular performance. Leo painted a picture with his words, describing every curve of the tower, every sun-drenched atrium, every whisper of the wind through its sky gardens. The room was captivated. Journalists scribbled furiously, investors nodded with wide, greedy eyes. The applause that followed was a tidal wave, a euphoric drug that flooded his system and washed away all doubt. He felt powerful, invincible. That night, his chief rival, Marcus, cornered him by the bar. Marcus's buildings were technically proficient but utterly soulless, and he despised Leo's flair. A lovely fairy tale, Leo, Marcus sneered, his smile thin and sharp. But dreams do not pay the bills. The board wants to see a foundation, not a fantasy. Just then, the project's primary investor clapped Leo on the shoulder. Do not listen to him, my boy. That presentation was everything. In fact, that passion is why we re-green-lighting your preliminary funding. We need that public vision to secure the second round. The investor's words were meant as a compliment, but they landed like a death sentence. The hunger had not just been fed, it had been made a condition of his success. Chapter 2. The high from the presentation lasted exactly 12 hours. The next morning, Leo sat at his desk, staring at the same blank sheet of paper. The Olympus Tower, which had felt so real and vibrant in his speech, now seemed like a distant, impossible ghost. The applause had been the reward, and his mind, satisfied, saw no reason for the labor. The hunger was quiet, sleeping off its feast, leaving behind a cold, hollow emptiness. Days turned into a week. Every time he tried to work, his mind would replay the standing ovation. He already felt the victory. The thought of the tedious, silent struggle to actually earn it felt pointless, like a joke with a punchline he already heard. He started avoiding calls from the investors. The pressure mounted, a physical weight on his chest. His confident facade began to crack. To get a small, pathetic fix, he found himself announcing mundane tasks to his assistant. I'm going to organize these blueprints now, Sarah, he declared, just to hear her say, great idea, Leo. Each empty compliment was a sip of salt water to a man dying of thirst. He was losing control, the spiral accelerating downwards. He spent his nights walking the city, staring up at the soulless towers built by men like Marcus, and was consumed by a tidal wave of self-loathing. He was not an architect anymore, he was a storyteller, a performer whose only stage was a conference room. The project stalled completely. Finally, the inevitable email arrived. It was from the board. Mr. Vance, we require a concrete project update with foundational schematics within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in the immediate termination of our agreement and a review of your professional conduct. 48 hours. The two words echoed in the silent office. He had nothing. The tower was still just a dream, and now, it was about to become his public nightmare. Chapter 3. In absolute desperation, Leo drove for hours to the secluded home of his old mentor, Elias Thorne, a legendary architect who had built only 5 buildings in his entire life, each one a masterpiece. Elias was a man of few words, a creature of silence and stone. Leo, trembling, confessed everything, the creative paralysis, the crushing pressure, the hunger. He called it his disease. Elias listened without expression, then stood and beckoned Leo to follow him not to his pristine studio, but to a dusty, locked shed behind his house. He unlocked the door, revealing not a gallery of triumphs, but a graveyard of failures. The room was crammed with hundreds of broken models, snapped in frustration. Blueprints were crumpled into balls, covered in angry red ink. It was the physical embodiment of 1,000 silent, agonizing battles. The world sees the 5 buildings, Elias said, his voice a low rumble. They do not see this. This is the price. The work is not the presentation at the end. The work is the war you wage in here, alone, in the dark. The truth hit Leo like a physical blow. His disease was not the need for praise, it was the terror of this room. The fear of failure, the fear of the silent, unglamorous struggle. He felt a surge of hope. He finally understood. He would be honest. He rushed back to the city, called an emergency meeting with the board, and, with his newfound clarity, confessed his creative block. He explained his realization, hoping this raw, vulnerable truth would buy him their trust and more time. He thought he was showing strength. They saw only catastrophic risk. As he spoke, he saw a flicker of triumph in the eyes of Marcus, who was also present. The moment Leo finished, Marcus stood up. "While I admire Leo's candor," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "this project is too important for an existential crisis." He unrolled a set of his own blueprints, a bland, predictable, but complete design. "This is a real building, not a feeling. It's ready to go." The board's decision was swift and brutal. The contract was terminated. The Olympus Tower was officially handed to Marcus. Leo had taken the profound truth from Elias's graveyard and twisted it into one last, desperate performance. And it had cost him everything. He was left with nothing but the silence he had always feared. Chapter 4. Leo sat in his empty office, the termination letter on his desk. He was at the bottom, the place he had spent his entire life running from. His gaze fell on his business card, Leo Vance, Visionary Architect. A title he had given himself, another performance. He thought of Elias Thorne. The old master had no title on his door, no grand declarations. He just had the work. And in that moment of total ruin, Leo finally understood the true lesson. The point was not to embrace failure publicly, it was to make the process so private that external judgment, good or bad, became irrelevant. The hunger was not a disease, it was a symptom of a life lived for an audience. The only cure was to fire the audience. With a strange sense of calm, he walked to the wall and tore down the glossy renderings of his unbuilt fantasies. He took the box of visionary business cards and dropped it into the trash. He sat down at his drafting table, took a single sheet of paper, and began to draw. Not a tower. Not a monument to his ego. He drew a chair. The lines were simple, honest. He focused on the grain of the wood, the angle of the joinery. No one would ever see it. There would be no applause. There was only the quiet scratch of pencil on paper, the simple joy of creation. It was the first real thing he had designed in years. A year later, an influential architecture journal published a cover story on the newly completed Olympus Tower. The review was scathing. It called Marcus's building a monument to mediocrity, a hollow vessel of corporate ambition, technically perfect but emotionally bankrupt. On the final page of the same journal, in a small, unheralded column, was a photograph of a stunningly beautiful, perfectly crafted wooden chair. It was praised for its quiet genius and profound simplicity. The designer was listed as anonymous. Miles away, in a small, quiet workshop filled with sawdust and the smell of cedar, Leo was hunched over a new table, sanding down a rough edge. He did not see the magazine. He did not hear the whispers of the architecture world. The shell was finally empty, not of life, but of the disease that had mimicked it. And in that perfect, productive silence, he was finally building. His addiction was destroying his family and health, while his neighbor slept until noon and was rich. Alex watched the sliver of light under his office door, the only thing separating his world of flickering monitors and stale coffee from the silent, accusatory darkness of the rest of the house. It was 3 a.m. Across the manicured lawn, Mark's mansion was a void, a black hole of effortless wealth. Not a single light on. Of course not. Mark was probably sleeping on a bed of money, dreaming of whatever rich, lazy people dreamed of. Alex's eyes burned. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, the mouse clicking like a time bomb under his trembling fingers. The addiction was not alcohol or pills. It was the grind. The hustle. The corrosive belief that sleep was for the weak and family time was a luxury he had not yet earned. A soft sound made him flinch. His wife, Sarah, stood in the doorway, her face a pale mask of exhaustion and sorrow. She was not angry anymore. That had burned out weeks ago. Now, she was just gone. "I booked the tickets, Alex," she whispered, holding up her phone. "The flight to the coast. The little hotel you promised me 2 years ago. We leave Friday." The words hit him like stones. Friday. The deadline for the Sterling Tower proposal was Thursday at midnight. The biggest project of his architectural career. His one shot to finally break free, to justify all these nights. "Sarah, you know I see not," he said, his voice raspy. "This project, it's everything. After this, I promise, we can go anywhere." "You always say that," she replied, her voice flat. "There's always another, after this. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your work. I'm asking you to choose between our life and your obsession." The choice was a physical weight, crushing the air from his lungs. His family or his future. It was an impossible, unfair equation. He was about to argue, to plead, to make another hollow promise, when an email pinged. The subject line made his heart stop: "Sterling Tower, urgent update." He opened it, his hands shaking. It was from the client himself. "Mr. Vance, just a formality. We were heavily considering your competitor, Mark Haddon, for this project. His firm's efficiency is legendary. But your personal commitment, the fact that I can get a reply from you at 2 a.m. That's what sealed the deal. We value a man who is all in. See you Thursday." Alex stared at the screen, a giddy, toxic relief washing over him. It was not a choice anymore. It was validation. He looked up at Sarah, a triumphant, pitying smile on his face. "He chose me, Sarah. He chose me over Mark. You see. This is why I do it." Sarah did not say a word. She just looked at the screen, then at him, and her expression broke him. It was not disappointment. It was grief, as if she were looking at a ghost. She turned and walked away, and the only sound was the soft click of her bedroom door closing him out for good. He acted on his choice with the fervor of a zealot. The client's email was his scripture, and the Sterling Tower was his salvation. He did not sleep for the next 48 hours, fueled by energy drinks and the righteous fire of his own sacrifice. He ignored Sarah's calls. He missed a text from his son about a school award. The world outside his office faded into a distant hum. Every line he drew, every calculation he made, was a brick in the monument to his hard work. The downward spiral began subtly. A misplaced decimal point in the structural load calculations, caught and corrected at 4 a.m. A call from a supplier, annoyed that Alex had forgotten to confirm a crucial materials order. Small fires he frantically stamped out, telling himself it was the price of genius. He was so deep in the maze of his work, he did not see the walls closing in. On Thursday evening, hours before the deadline, he hit send on the final proposal. A masterpiece of 150 pages. He leaned back, his body screaming in protest, a wave of vertigo washing over him. He had done it. He stumbled out of his office, ready to collapse, to finally sleep. The house was too quiet. A note was on the kitchen table. I've gone to my sister's. Your son is with me. The house is yours, Alex. I hope it was worth it. His blood ran cold. He tried to call her, but the phone went straight to voicemail. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his exhaustion. As he stood there, his world crumbling, his phone rang. It was the client. Vance, the voice boomed, devoid of its earlier warmth. My engineers just found a fatal flaw in your proposal. You overlooked a key city zoning ordinance. Your entire foundation plan is illegal. The presentation is off. Alex's mind went blank. The zoning ordinance. He made a note to double-check it, a small task lost in the hurricane of his sleepless nights. I can fix it, he stammered, his voice cracking. Do not bother, the client snapped. You just cost me a month and a lot of political capital. We redone. The line went dead. The project was gone. His wife was gone. He sank to the floor, the pristine white note a cruel counterpoint to the ruins of his life. And as if the universe had one last joke to play, a certified letter lay on the doormat, delivered that afternoon. It was a foreclosure notice from the bank. The initial payment for the Sterling Tower, the money he had already mentally spent, was supposed to cover the mortgage. He was not just a failure, he was a fraud in a house he no longer owned. He found himself on Mark's doorstep an hour later, reeking of whiskey and despair. He did not know what he wanted. To yell. To fight. To demand the secret to a life that seemed like a cruel joke at his expense. Mark opened the door, not in silk pajamas, but in a simple t-shirt and jeans. He did not look surprised. He looked bored. Alex, he said calmly. I figured you'd be stopping by. Come in. Alex stumbled inside, ready to unleash a torrent of rage, but Mark cut him off. Let me guess. The Sterling Project. Zoning flaw. You worked yourself into the ground and blew it at the finish line. The words were so accurate they felt like a physical blow. Mark led him to a minimalist office, dominated by a single, massive screen. You think I'm lazy, do not you? Mark said, tapping a few keys. You think I sleep all day? The truth is, I work about 4 hours a day. Because I built this. On the screen, a program came to life. I call it Nexus, Mark said. It's an architectural AI I developed. It handles 90% of the grunt work. Compliance checks, material sourcing, structural analytics, all automated. The zoning flaw that sank you. Nexus would have flagged it in 0.8 seconds. He turned to Alex, his expression unreadable. I can help you. We can run your proposal through Nexus, fix the error, and resubmit. You can save your career. Right now. A surge of delirious hope shot through Alex. A lifeline. A magic bullet. He numbly handed over his data stick. For the next hour, he watched in stunned silence as Mark's AI elegantly dismantled and rebuilt his flawed masterpiece. It was beautiful. It was perfect. Mark made the call to the client, putting it on speakerphone, explaining that a clerical error had been fixed. The client, impressed by the speed, agreed to see them both in the morning. For a moment, Alex felt a flicker of partnership, of victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. The next morning, in the client's boardroom, the presentation was flawless. The client was ecstatic. Incredible. He boomed, shaking Mark's hand. This is the most efficient, brilliant fix I've ever seen. He then turned to Alex, his eyes cold. Vance, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Your contract is terminated, of course. But I'm officially signing a multi-year, exclusive licensing deal with Mr. Haddon for his Nexus platform. It's far more valuable to my company than a single architect. We're cutting out the middleman. Alex stared, uncomprehending. Mark stood beside him, a picture of calm success. He met Alex's horrified gaze and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug. It was not a rescue. It was an ambush. Mark had not just saved the project, he had used Alex's failure as a live product demo to steal his client, his career, and the last shred of his dignity. Alex was not just beaten. He was the fool on which a smarter man had built an empire. He was back in his empty office, the foreclosure notice a bookmark in his life's final, pathetic chapter. Rock bottom was not a loud crash, it was a profound, suffocating silence. He stared at the Sterling Tower plans, the monument to his own stupidity. He saw the elegant lines, the grand vision, and the tiny, fatal flaw. But then his eyes caught something else. A small, handwritten annotation in the margin, made weeks ago, before the madness took over. Client ego note, non-negotiable. Rooftop Zen garden must have authentic Yoshino cherry trees, not maples. Personal to his late wife. It was a trivial detail, an artistic flourish. An inefficient, sentimental request. Nexus, the god of optimization, would have flagged it as a budgetary anomaly, suggesting a cheaper, hardier local tree. Mark, the priest of systems, would have agreed, seeing only a percentage point to be saved. He sold efficiency, not empathy. And in that moment, the epiphany struck Alex, not as a lightning bolt, but as a slow, cold sunrise. Mark had not stolen his career. He had only stolen the parts that could be automated. He could not steal the human part. The part that listened. With a clarity he had not felt in years, Alex picked up the phone. He did not call to beg or to bargain. He called the client. Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice steady. I understand your decision to go with Nexus. It's a brilliant system for building a tower. But it will never build your tower. He paused. That Zen garden you wanted. For your wife. Nexus will tell you Yoshino cherry trees are a poor choice for this climate. It will recommend concrete benches because they have better ROI. I'm the only person who knows why those trees matter more than the entire budget. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The sound of a man of immense ego realizing he was about to be optimized into a statistic. The next day, a new contract arrived via courier. Not just for the Sterling Tower, but for 2 future projects. A new clause was highlighted in yellow: lead architect's personal design supervision is mandatory and non-negotiable. A week later, Alex was sketching in a notebook in his sunlit office, the scent of fresh coffee in the air. Sarah walked in, not with a suitcase, but with 2 mugs. She placed one on his desk and put a hand on his shoulder. He looked up, and for the first time in years, she saw not a haunted workaholic, but the man she had married. Outside, a moving truck was parked in front of Mark's mansion. A for sale sign was hammered into the perfect lawn. His addiction had been the noise of being busy. His salvation was the quiet power of being present. The cruelest thing ever done to him was not by his enemies, but by those he helped the most. Arthur felt this truth settle deep in his bones, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn wind rattling the loose timbers of his small home. For a week, the rain had been a relentless drum, and the dark, spreading stain on his ceiling was a map of his own neglect. He had the wood, the skill, and he had planned to fix the roof. But then Mrs. Gable's fence had collapsed, young Thomas needed his cartwheel mended, and the village elder, Maeve, had insisted the community hall's porch was a danger to the children. His own home was always the last on the list. Now, the wind whistled through the gaps in his walls, and the steady drip, 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 into a bucket was the mocking rhythm of his own generosity. The antagonist was not a single person, it was the village's bottomless, smiling need, and it wore the faces of his friends. Today, he decided, pulling on his worn coat, would be different. Today, he would be selfish. As he stepped outside, tools in hand, Maeve was already there, her face a mask of practiced concern. "Arthur," she said, her voice smooth as a river stone. "A disaster. The Great Hall. The foundation stone has a crack. A terrible, deep crack." Arthur looked past her at the bruised, heavy clouds. A real storm was coming. "Maeve, my roof, your roof can wait," she cut in, her tone sharpening just enough to sting. "This is the heart of our village. It holds our winter stores. If it falls..." She left the threat hanging in the air. The choice was laid before him, as clear and as cold as a headsman's axe, his small, private shelter, or the survival of the collective. He tried to bargain. "Let me secure my own roof first. An hour, 2 at most. Then I will see to the hall." Maeve's smile was a sliver of ice. "Of course, Arthur. We all understand that your own needs must come first." Her words, spoken just loud enough for 2 nearby farmers to hear, were a public shaming. The heat of it burned in his gut. "Fine. The hall first." As he turned to follow her, she placed a hand on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "One more thing," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The crack is right beneath the main support beam. If that storm hits before you redone, the whole structure could fail. The fate of our village is in your hands, Arthur." He worked in a desperate fury, the choice no longer feeling like a choice at all. The wind tore at him, driving icy rain into his face, but he ignored the screaming protest of his old bones. The so-called crack was a hairline fracture, something he could have sealed in an hour. But Maeve, watching from the doorway, insisted on a full reinforcement, new mortar, support braces, even a drainage trench. It was a week's work, not a day's. He toiled, his mind a numb buzz of hammers and chisels, each gust of wind a reminder of his own exposed home. Villagers would stop by, not to help, but to watch. "You a saint, Arthur." They'd call out before hurrying back to their own warm, dry houses. The hypocrisy was a bitter taste in his mouth, but he swallowed it down and kept working. On the 3rd day, the storm broke in its full, biblical fury. He hammered the final brace into place just as the sky turned black, the great hall now more secure than it had ever been. Soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably, he stumbled back to his cottage. The sight that met him broke something deep inside. His ceiling had given way. A cascade of sodden thatch and splintered wood lay across his bed. Rain poured through a gaping hole in the roof, soaking everything he owned. His precious tools, his life's work, were already beginning to rust in pools of muddy water. His winter food stores were a spoiled, watery mess. He had saved them, and in doing so, he had damned himself. That night, a fever took hold. He lay on the damp floor, wrapped in a single wet blanket, his body shaking with a violent, racking cough. By morning, burning with fever but driven by desperation, he went for help. He knocked on the gable's door. "My roof," he rasped. "Mr. Gable looked uncomfortable. "A terrible shame, Arthur. But with this storm, we must look after our own." The door closed. He tried Thomas, whose card he had fixed for free. The young man would not even meet his eye. "I have my own family to think of," he mumbled, shutting the door in his face. Finally, trembling and on the verge of collapse, he made his way to Maeve. He found her directing two men as they carried sacks of flour, her private stores, into the newly reinforced section of the great hall. She saw him and her face softened into a performance of pity. "Arthur. You poor man. Come inside, out of this dreadful rain." She led him into the hall, the very place he had saved, and sat him by a small, cold hearth. "We are all so grateful for your sacrifice," she said, patting his hand. For a moment, a flicker of hope ignited within him. Perhaps he had been wrong. Perhaps they did care. He opened his mouth to ask for help, for a place to stay, for some food, but she spoke first. "The entire village is talking," she went on, her voice filled with a terrible, sweet sympathy. "About how you put the community before yourself. A true hero." She leaned closer. "But a hero who is now homeless and ill. It is a tragedy." This was it, he thought. She was going to offer him aid. But then came the twist of the knife. "Do not you worry," she said, her eyes gleaming. "The village will take care of its hero. We have agreed. You can have a cot here, in the corner of the hall. And in return for our charity, you can of course handle the small repairs that are always needed. It is the least you can do to repay the kindness we are showing you." The words hit him like a physical blow. It was not an offer of help. It was a prison sentence. He had not just lost his home, he had become the village's indentured servant, his heroism a chain they would use to bind him forever. He was a tool to be kept in a box until needed, his worth defined only by his utility to them. He was in the lowest, darkest place of his life, a savior they had crowned with thorns and then condemned to a life of grateful servitude. That night, lying on a thin, lumpy cot in the cold, cavernous hall, the fever raging, Arthur looked at his hands. They were gnarled, scarred, and blistered, but they were strong. They were the hands that had built and mended this entire village. They had fixed the gables, fence, Thomas's cart, and Maeve's hall. And what had it earned him? Pity and a prison cot. A chilling clarity cut through the fever's haze. Kindness given to a thief is not a virtue, it is a tool for your own destruction. The choice in front of him had never been about his roof versus their hall. It had been about his self-respect versus their exploitation. And he had chosen wrong. But it was not too late to choose again. He rose, his body aching but his mind sharp as a new blade. He did not go to confront Maeve. He did not plead with the villagers. Words were their weapon, and he would not fight on their terms. He went to his ruined cottage and retrieved one thing, his heavy wood axe. He returned to the silent great hall. He walked to the foundation stone he had repaired. And he looked up at the massive new support beam he had installed under Maeve's urgent command, the very beam she had lied about. Methodically, with the quiet precision of a master craftsman, he began to dismantle it. He did not smash it. He unfastened the braces. He removed the pegs. He took back what was his. An hour later, the great wooden beam lay on the floor. The hairline crack in the foundation was now under the full, unsupported weight of the roof and the coming winter snows. Maeve's lie had been made real. He took nothing else. He left the beam lying there, a monument to his final act of service, and walked out of the hall. As the first light of dawn broke, Arthur walked out of the village without looking back. He left behind a community that would soon discover its heart was not just cracked, but truly and irrevocably broken. They had not destroyed him. They had simply shown him, finally, the price of his own kindness. He kicked the stray puppy right under the wheels of a car. It had only pressed against his leg, searching for warmth. A screech of tires sliced through the cold evening air, the sound of physical blow. Arthur did not flinch. He watched as the small, dark car swerved violently, its horn blaring a furious, impotent scream before it shuddered to a stop mere inches from the whimpering ball of fur. He felt a surge of cold satisfaction. The world was messy, weak, and full of pathetic things asking for comfort. He merely put them in their place. The car door flew open and a woman emerged, her face pale with shock under the orange glow of the streetlights. "What is wrong with you?" she yelled, her voice trembling with rage. She ran to the puppy, kneeling on the damp asphalt. Arthur adjusted the collar of his expensive wool coat. "It was in my way," he said, his tone flat and dismissive. This was his antagonist, not the woman, not the dog, but the cloying, sentimental weakness they represented. The central conflict was his war against it, a war he fought every day in the boardroom and on the street. "In your way," she repeated, her voice cracking with disbelief as she gently scooped the terrified animal into her arms. "It's a baby." It was scared. He saw this as an opportunity to reinforce control, his first attempt to solve the problem of this unwanted witness. He took a deliberate step towards her, invading her space. "You should watch where you re-driving," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Things can get complicated. It would be a shame if someone misinterpreted this scene." The woman, Ilara, looked up at him. Her fear was quickly being replaced by a hard, defiant anger. She held the puppy tighter. "I have a dashcam," she said, her chin held high. "It saw everything." Arthur felt a flicker of annoyance. A complication. He had a choice: escalate the threat, or walk away and hope she did nothing. He chose a third option, a blend of both. He gave a thin, humorless smile. "Then I'm sure it also saw a stray animal running into traffic. A public nuisance. Good night." He turned and walked away, the click of his leather shoes on the pavement the only sound he left behind. He was certain he had won. He arrived at his sterile, minimalist apartment, the encounter already fading from his mind. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and opened his laptop. An email sat at the top of his inbox, flagged as urgent. The sender was Marcus Thorne, the firm's senior partner, the man who held Arthur's promotion in his hands. The subject line read, "Our firm's commitment." He opened it. It was a firm-wide announcement. Thorne was proudly trumpeting his wife's new role as the chairperson for the city's largest animal rescue gala. The email was filled with saccharine language about protecting the vulnerable and speaking for those who cannot speak for themselves. It ended with a photo. Thorne, his wife, and their smiling faces, surrounded by a dozen rescued dogs. The final sentence made the whiskey turn to acid in Arthur's stomach. I expect to see every member of our team at the gala this Saturday to show our unwavering support. The next 48 hours were a slow-motion spiral into a quiet hell. Arthur felt the walls of his controlled world begin to sweat. A single, foolish act of impulse now threatened to demolish years of ruthless ambition. He tried to act as if nothing was wrong, but the image of the woman's face, Ilara, was seared into his mind. She was the loose thread that could unravel everything. He could not risk her showing up at that gala. He had to neutralize the threat. Using a private investigator, a tool he usually reserved for hostile takeovers, he found her. Ilara was an artist, a painter who worked out of a small studio downtown. The discovery only deepened his contempt. Of course she was. He went to her studio the next day. The place smelled of turpentine and linseed oil, a chaotic riot of color and emotion that made his skin crawl. She was there, working on a large canvas. The puppy was curled up in a dog bed in the corner, its leg bandaged. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his voice a carefully constructed instrument of reason. "I want to apologize. And to compensate you for the veterinary bills." He placed a thick envelope of cash on a nearby table. "Let's consider this matter closed." Ilara wiped her hands on a rag, her eyes never leaving his. "It's not about the money," she said calmly. "It's about the fact that you felt nothing. You would have let him die and kept walking." "I was having a bad day," he lied, the words tasting like ash. "It would not happen again." "I'm sure it would not," she said, and there was a new, unsettling confidence in her voice. "Because people like you eventually face consequences." She pushed the envelope back towards him. "Get out of my studio." He left, the failure churning in his gut. The pressure was building. At the office, he could feel Thorne's eyes on him during meetings, an unnerving, analytical gaze. Whispers seemed to follow him down the hallways. He felt a creeping paranoia, the sense that his perfect facade was cracking. He worked later, harder, trying to bury his anxiety under mountains of paperwork, but it was no use. He had lost control, and the feeling was maddening. The gala loomed, not as an obligation, but as a scaffold. On Saturday evening, dressed in a tuxedo that felt more like a shroud, he walked into the grand ballroom, his heart hammering against his ribs. It was worse than he imagined. Hundreds of the city's elite mingled, and on a giant screen behind the main stage, a slideshow of rescued animals played on a loop. Every photo of a dog felt like a personal accusation. He tried to blend in, to become invisible, but it was impossible. Then, he saw her. Ilara. She was standing near the stage, speaking with Marcus Thorne's wife. She was not just a guest, she looked like she belonged there. A cold dread washed over Arthur. This was it. She was going to tell them. He was finished. But then, an idea sparked in the darkness, a desperate, brilliant gamble. He could not let her expose him, he had to expose himself first, on his own terms. It was the only way to control the narrative. He found the event organizer and, with a few well-placed words about a spontaneous and significant donation, secured himself 2 minutes at the podium. He walked onto the stage, the spotlight blinding him. The room fell silent. "Good evening," he began, his voice thick with practiced emotion. "My name is Arthur Finch, and I am here tonight not just as a partner at my firm, but as a changed man." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. He told a carefully edited version of the story, a moment of stress, a terrible mistake, and the profound, immediate regret. He spoke of his journey in the last few days, and as the finale, he publicly pledged $50,000 to the shelter. For a moment, it worked. A wave of applause, hesitant at first, then warmer, washed over him. He had done it. He had taken her power, twisted the story, and emerged a hero. He stepped down from the stage, his heart soaring with the thrill of victory. And then Marcus Thorne walked up to the microphone, a wide, predatory smile on his face. "Arthur, thank you," Thorne began, his voice booming through the speakers. "That was truly moving. Your generosity is inspiring." He let the word hang in the air. "It's wonderful to see you have such a profound change of heart." Thorne scanned the crowd, his eyes twinkling with something cruel. "You see, we at the firm believe in second chances. And Arthur's story of his moment of stress is particularly touching to me personally." He paused, letting the tension build to an unbearable peak. "Because the heroic young woman who swerved her car to save that puppy," Thorne announced, his smile widening as he gestured towards the side of the stage. "The artist who has been nursing it back to health and who alerted us to this entire situation is my daughter, Ilara." The room went dead silent. The applause died in people's throats. Every eye in the ballroom turned to Arthur. The truth crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. This was not a party, it was an execution. Thorne had not been testing him. He had been building his coffin. His apology was not a masterful save, it was the final, self-inflicted nail. He was trapped, exposed, and utterly destroyed, not by his enemy, but by his own desperate attempt to win. Humiliation was a physical sensation, a heat that crawled up his neck and set his face on fire. He fled the ballroom, the sound of polite, murderous silence chasing him out into the night. He walked for hours, the city lights blurring through a haze of shame and fury. He had built his entire life on the principle of control, of being the predator, never the prey. Now, Thorne had revealed him for what he was, a weak, pathetic animal, cornered and afraid. He found himself back on the same street, the same spot on the pavement where it had all begun. He stared at the asphalt as if he could still see the ghost of the cowering puppy. And in that moment, at the absolute bottom, something inside him finally broke. The epiphany was not a flash of light, but a quiet, crushing realization. His entire life had been a reaction. A reaction to a fear of weakness. He kicked the puppy not because he was strong, but because its vulnerability terrified him, for it mirrored a deep, hidden part of himself he could not bear to face. Thorne did not defeat him, Arthur had defeated himself the moment he lifted his foot. The next morning, he did not go to work. He did not answer the dozens of calls from the office. He went to the city animal shelter. The building was loud, filled with the chaotic symphony of barking and whining he had always despised. He walked past the front desk, past the volunteers, and went straight to the kennels. He found the puppy in one of the last cages. A small card was clipped to the wire mesh door. It read, "Rory." Arthur knelt, his expensive suit wrinkling on the cold concrete floor. The puppy, Rory, watched him with cautious, intelligent eyes. It did not bark. It did not cower. He did not reach out to pet it. He did not speak. He simply knelt there, stripped of his ambition, his power, and his pride, meeting the gaze of the creature he had tried to erase. He saw not weakness, but a simple, stubborn will to live. After a long silence, the puppy took a hesitant step forward. Then another. It slowly approached the wire door of the cage, its bandaged leg held carefully off the ground. It stopped just inches from his face and watched him. Then, it pressed its small, warm body against the cage, searching for a warmth that was no longer there. And for the first time, Arthur did not kick it away. The grave is waiting for you, while you feed that bastard every day of your own free will. You see him in the bathroom mirror, not in the reflection, but just behind it. He has your eyes, but they hollow. He has your mouth, but it's twisted into a permanent, knowing smirk. He's the architect of your comfortable, quiet, suffocating life. Today, he's particularly loud. Just get through the morning meeting, he whispers, his voice smooth as oil. Do not make eye contact. Do not volunteer. Survive. You nod, splashing cold water on your face as if you could wash him away. At the office, the air is electric. Your boss, Henderson, stands before the team. He talks about the Odyssey project, a career-making, high-stakes initiative that could redefine the company. It's the kind of opportunity you dream about in the lonely hours of the night, before the bastard wakes up to remind you of your limits. I need a leader for this, Henderson says, his eyes scanning the room. Someone with vision. With courage. His gaze lands on you for a fraction of a second. A spark ignites in your chest. This is it. Your chance to starve the voice, to prove him wrong. Your hand feels heavy, but you begin to lift it. Do not, the voice hisses, a cold dread washing over you. You fail. They all see you fail. Mark is better prepared. Let him do it. It's safer. Your arm freezes halfway up, a pathetic, hesitant gesture. In that moment of paralysis, Mark's hand shoots into the air. I'm ready, sir, he says, his voice booming with a confidence you can only imitate in your dreams. Henderson beams. Excellent, Mark. That's the attitude I am looking for. The spark in your chest dies, leaving behind a familiar, bitter ash. The bastard chuckles. See. I saved you from humiliation. The choice is laid before you a moment later. Henderson, perhaps noticing your pathetic attempt, approaches your desk. Look, he says, his voice softer now, tinged with something you recognize as pity. I have a smaller task. Data collation for the Odyssey project. It's crucial support work. Quiet. Behind the scenes. Can you handle that? The choice is a knife's edge. You can take the safe, invisible role, proving the bastard right that you belong in the shadows. Or you can refuse, and fight for a place on the main team, risking Henderson's annoyance and total rejection. Before you can answer, Henderson claps you on the shoulder, a gesture that feels more like a push downwards. Actually, it's perfect for you. No pressure. Just do what you do best. The choice has been made for you. And the bastard loves it. You accept the support role. The word yes feels like dirt in your mouth. The bastard purrs with satisfaction, a fat cat enjoying a meal. Good choice, he says. This is smart. This is safe. The grave can wait. The following weeks are a slow-motion spiral into hell. Your desk is buried in spreadsheets and reports, the dry, lifeless skeleton of the project that Mark is breathing life into down the hall. You hear the laughter from their strategy meetings, the excited buzz of a team on a mission. You are not on the team. You are the janitor, cleaning up the data they leave behind. Every attempt you make to contribute beyond your assigned role is subtly blocked. You find a critical flaw in a dataset and email Mark, suggesting a solution. He replies 2 days later, "Thanks, handled." In the next team-wide update, you hear him presenting your solution as his own brilliant insight. The bastard floods your mind with a sick, twisted logic. Of course he took it. He SA leader. You readjust, you. This is how the world works. Be grateful you even have a job. You try to focus, but your own work becomes sloppy. You make a calculation error, a small thing, but it causes a day's delay. Henderson's email is brief and cold. I need you to be more careful. This is a simple task. The defeat is no longer just professional, it's personal. You see the pity in your colleague's eyes. You start eating lunch at your desk, avoiding the break room. You go home and the silence of your apartment is deafening, filled only by the bastard's constant, demoralizing monologue. You are living the life he designed for you. One evening, desperate for a way back in, you stay late, preparing a detailed report that anticipates the project's next steps. You slide it under Henderson's door, a quiet display of your commitment. As you approach his office, you hear voices. It's Henderson and Mark. He's just not built for it, Mark is saying. He lacks the hunger. Honestly, having him do the grunt work is the best place for him. You freeze, the report in your hand feeling like a tombstone. The final door has just been bolted shut. The bastard's laughter echoes in your skull. You are buried alive. At your lowest point, sitting in the dark of your apartment, you find an old journal from college. The pages are filled with a forgotten version of yourself, someone ambitious, hopeful, fearless. On one page, a quote is scrawled in angry, bold letters, "The only thing stopping you is the bullshit story you keep telling yourself." It's a jolt of electricity. The bastard is not a separate entity. It's not him. It's a story. It's your story. And you can write a different one. A new plan forms, brilliant and terrifying. You would not fight Mark for a place on his team. You build a better one. You spend the next 48 hours in a frenzy, without sleep, fueled by rage and coffee. You use your intimate knowledge of the data, the very data from your grunt work, to identify a massive, untapped market that the Odyssey project completely ignores. You build a counterproposal, a secret, Project Trojan, complete with market analysis, revenue projections, and a lean, aggressive launch strategy. It's not a suggestion, it's a coup. This is your one shot to kill the bastard by proving you were never the support crew, you were the visionary all along. You bypass Henderson and email it directly to the CEO. For a moment, it works. The CEO calls you into his office, the email glowing on his monitor. He's intrigued, almost excited. This is audacious, he says, a glint in his eye. You feel a surge of victory. The bastard is silent for the first time in years. But it's a trap. The CEO, a politician before a businessman, does not see a visionary. He sees a disgruntled employee creating chaos. He calls Henderson and Mark into the meeting. Mark, the CEO says, forwarding him the email. Your team seems to have a communication problem. But this energy, this is good. Take this idea. Absorb it into Odyssey. And you, he says, turning to you, his eyes now cold as ice, learn to be a team player. Your insubordination is on record. Mark looks at you, his face a mask of predatory triumph. He did not just steal your idea, he watched you hand-deliver the weapon for your own execution. The bastard is not just a voice anymore. He is standing right in front of you, wearing Mark's suit. And he just took everything. You are back at your desk. The office is silent. You've been publicly humiliated. You are nothing. The bastard's voice returns, no longer a whisper but a roar. It's over. Just quit. Go home. Crawl into bed. Disappear. That is where you belong. In the dark. Alone. He's right. It is over. You stare at the blank monitor, the reflection showing a pale, defeated stranger. You have lost. But in the depths of this absolute failure, a strange clarity emerges. The problem was never the job. It was never Mark. It was the choice. The choice to believe the story. The bastard thrives on conflict and external validation. He wanted you to fight Mark, to win the CEO's approval, to get the promotion. But what if the only way to win is not to play his game? You stand up. Your legs feel steady for the first time in months. You walk past your colleagues, who avert their eyes. You walk past Mark's office, where he's loudly taking credit for your strategy on a conference call. You walk into Henderson's office and close the door. He looks up, annoyed. What now? He snaps. You do not make excuses. You do not accuse Mark. You look him directly in the eye. You were right, you say, your voice calm and even. My attitude was wrong from the beginning. I let fear make my decisions. I apologize for my unprofessionalism and for the disruption I caused. Henderson is stunned into silence. This is not the confrontation he expected. The ideas in that proposal were sound, you continue, and they came from the work I was assigned. Mark will do a great job implementing them. My only request is to be reassigned to a different department. Any department. I need a clean slate. The bastard is screaming in your head, calling you a coward, a fool for giving up. But you are not giving up. You are letting go. You are taking away his power by refusing to engage in the drama he craves. You are choosing your own peace over his twisted definition of victory. Henderson studies you, his expression shifting from anger to confusion, and finally, to a sliver of something that looks like respect. I'll see what I can do, he says quietly. As you walk out of the office, past the whispers and the stares, you feel light. There is Northwest Victory Parade. No dramatic reversal of fortune. You may have lost the job, the project, and the respect of your peers. But you walk away with something you have not owned in a decade, yourself. The bastard is still there, but his voice is a faint echo now, a powerless whine. He ca not hurt you anymore, because you stopped listening to his story. You glance at your reflection in the polished elevator doors as they close. The grave is still out there, waiting for everyone. But you no longer digging it with your own hands. You left the bastard inside, holding the shovel, all alone.